Karen Spilka, and the House Speaker Robert DeLeo. It'll be CC to Senator Dean Tran, Senator James Eldridge, Representative Kate Hogan, Representative Harold Norton, Bolton Town Administrator Don Lowe, Stowe Town Administrator Bill Wrigley, Lancaster Town Administrator Orlando Pacheco, and our Superintendent Brooke Clenching. Whereas schools have the responsibility to equip students with their civil right of obtaining a free and appropriate public education, it is the responsibility of each school to ensure we create a welcoming community for all students. And whereas it is the responsibility that every district provide to all district staff, including school committee members, annual professional development on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And whereas every district will commit to recruiting and retaining a diverse and culturally responsive teaching workforce. And whereas every district will examine their policies for institutional and systemic racialized practices and implement change with sustainable policies that are evidence-based. And whereas every district will incorporate into their curriculum the history of racial oppression and works by Black authors and works from diverse perspectives. And whereas we, as school district leaders, can no longer remain silent to the issues of racism and hate that continue to plague our public and private institutions. Resolved, that the Neshoba Regional School District and all the districts in this Commonwealth must guarantee racist practices are eradicated and diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded and practiced for our students, family, faculty, and staff. We must ensure our own school culture and that of every district in the Commonwealth is anti-racist, that acknowledges that all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. Respectfully, Neshoba Regional School Committee, and we are all named. So if I could have a motion. Elaine, I think it's toward the end of our list of motions.
Elaine, you're muted.
Oh, Elaine.
Thank you. Yes, I move to adopt the Neshoba Regional School Committee anti-racism resolution.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Discussion. Questions? Seeing none, I will call the vote. Elaine?
Yes, thank you.
Kathy? Yes. Steve?
Yes.
Joseph?
Joseph, you're muted.
You're muted.
Yes.
Thank you. Brett? Yes. Leah?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
And I think Steve, not Steve, I guess Mike will be coming at some point. Okay, so it is unanimous, the yeas. So that I think there are 7 yeas, no nays, and absent, I would put Mike Koresh down for the vote. Okay, and I'm going to turn it over to Brooke in just a minute, but I did want to give the committee an opportunity if there was anything they wanted to say relative to our statement or to the resolution to our government officials. Hearing, oh, Mary, go ahead.
First of all, I am wholeheartedly in favor of this resolution and in the way it's worded. And it will be something that will take a majority of emphasis for all of us in the upcoming year. And rather than say exactly how this will play out, no, I would envision, and I think other people too would envision, that we would have forums, listening sessions, so that our families, our students, our community can come forward and talk about the areas that they see, as well as surveys could be part of this. I mean, some ways, as well as having outside folks come in who have the expertise to be able to guide and to educate all of us, no matter who we are, that we could be more educated and more open, especially to our own practices. So I see this as a major emphasis. I know the superintendent does too, and the whole school committee does. And I want our citizenry that we represent to understand how seriously we take this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. And I know that this is our focus. Our commitment is in this direction. And there's a lot of work to do, but we're going to tackle it and figure out the best way to approach it. And just to jump ahead just a little bit, perhaps this is the focus that our retreat can take in terms of planning. Okay. All right, Brooke, I'm going to turn it over to you to pick up where we left off here.
Sure, thank you. So I want to thank the number of parents out there who had reached out to me in the last couple of weeks on the same topic. But one email stood out more than any others. And as I started to read it, and I know I had said this to one or two others who had written in as well, that I'm not sure the depth of feelings that you all felt, but certainly as I was reading through some of these, I found this flood of feelings that came over me that I think were new to me. I don't think because I think I was looking at through a different type of a lens, particularly when I got this one email. And the author of the email is one of our Stowe parents, and I don't want to name that individual right now, but what she had done is included part of the introduction to her dissertation. And she said, you know, I want you to read this. And as I read through her experiences being of African American heritage and reading through, it was a whole type of heart wrenching that I felt as I was reading her describing her experiences when she was younger. She does work in another school district, so she's an educator. She's actually an administrator, and she's doing work in this area in that particular school district. And so as she went through the email, her writings to me, she offered to help support our work. And I think that she would be absolutely fabulous to help us. She's incredibly bright, incredibly gifted, and she would just be a wonderful addition to our work. And so she volunteered to do this. So Todd and I had connected right away, and the other individual who had stepped up to the plate immediately was Dr. Angulo, and we want to give a shout out to both Caitlin Angulo and Mark Levine, both assistant principals at Florence Sawyer who've just graduated with their doctorate. So when I say Dr. Angulo, that's who I'm talking about now. So we're thrilled. She has a real passion for the work in this area. And just the way that our staffing is going to work this year, she will be able to put a lot of energy into this. And so we are delighted. She's going out on mat leave for a short mat leave, and then will return, but will continue to do the work through that process of having a wonderful little baby coming into the world. So we're thrilled for her with that too. So I know that Dr. McGuire started to have the first discussion with his new group, and we know that that's going to be a focus of our work. And so we see this parent from Stowe being integral in that work, and we're thrilled that she would think and be so gracious to offer her support and her expertise in this. So we think that she and Dr. Angulo will make a wonderful pair. So maybe I'll turn it over to Dr. McGuire just to kind of comment a little bit on some of the work that we see coming in this area.
Sure. So really excited that I was able to meet with my teaching and learning team yesterday, what really is my new teaching and learning team, which will be the makeup of our new teaching and learning team come really this summer, which is made up of Martina Kenyon, who's our curriculum coordinator, and Kim Early, who's our humanities lead, and Karen Bover, who's our math lead. Caitlin, Dr. Angulo joined us as well because of the work that she's going to do around social justice and equity as it relates to race. We also are going to reach out to Christy Nealon, who is our assistant principal over at the center school, because she's got a real strong passion for this kind of work too, and also how it intertwines with social emotional learning, which, as we know, is one of our top priorities in the district improvement plan. Um, so we're really excited about kind of mapping that out as we kind of fix it and put it with the components of our remote learning task force, which we're going to talk, I think, at length about a little bit later on tonight. And I've got some flow charts and some diagrams to show you. But the work in the email that Superintendent Clinchy mentioned about the individual who reached out, and we're taking a look at some work that other districts are doing, and really looking at identifying goals and really creating some sort of racial climate task force as well. So in those kinds of goals that we're looking at in other districts, in particular this one district that was shared with us, but really looking at recruiting and hiring and retaining educators of diverse backgrounds and educators of color, really focused on professional development for teachers in this area, and also really tying in student voice, because we certainly want to involve students in this work, as well as how we engage the community around these topics. So that was really some of the basis of our meeting yesterday, but we're really excited to bring this kind of work into the work that we see ahead of us for this summer as we enter the fall months.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions? These are just baby steps for us to take right now. So this is a process in the infancy of its very beginning, early stages. But I feel really, really good about the people that are involved in this and the level of passion that they have for this work. So I'm really looking forward to the work that's going to be accomplished this year.
And I'm sorry. Go ahead, Leah. Leah.
So thanks, guys. That all sounds like you have a lot that you're thinking about. That's fantastic. Can you elaborate maybe a little bit more on how you are going to involve? I know that you talked about this one parent in Stowe, but can you just talk a little bit more about how you would involve the community in kind of getting our heads around what the problem or what the challenges may be, and include in that how you're going to involve student voice?
I think we're far too early in the process to be discussing that at this point in time, Leah. If we had something concrete, we'll certainly bring it to you as soon as we have that. Right now, it's just, as I say, it's in the infancy stage, just having the broad discussions right now, and kind of the think tank moment of what could this look like, what should this look like, and what are other school districts doing that are doing it successfully. That, as I said to Mike Horsch, we're never afraid to steal great ideas from other school districts. So that's really kind of where we're at. Dr. McGuire?
Yeah, I'll just add the first step, Leah. We had a very large administrative meeting at the end of last week. And then again, my teaching and learning team met yesterday, and certainly the priority from everybody came to make sure on all of our task force moving forward, even looking ahead for the fall, and with this racial climate piece, to include parents from each of our communities, parents from each of our buildings, and certainly students. It's particularly, in the upper grade levels, but even in our younger grade levels, to include them on those task force, because that's where we've really identified a framework for this work. And with those task force, we're going to have stakeholders and members from all walks of the Neshoba community in each of those task force. So that's step one in terms of involving them and making sure they're a part of that process.
And we have to organize our process as a school committee as well. Certainly, there are some things that we can join in on with Brooke and Todd and their teams. But I think as a school committee, we need to have some discussions. And I see that work's really getting started when we have our retreat. And I'm thinking about getting together a subcommittee to plan the retreat. My original idea, and I'm making some assumptions about moving forward, but it has changed, and I feel very strongly that as leaders in the district that we can make a difference and engage the community in these conversations moving forward. But the specifics, again, we need to work them out. But I think this committee has a real strength for doing stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to doing the work with you guys. Leah.
I would just say one final thing, and I'm saying this in the district that I work in as well,
Mhm.
is that I think that there should be an emphasis placed upon the concept of partnership. I don't
Yes.
think that there is a single person who doesn't want this to go in the right direction.
Yep.
And so I think working together in partnership, all of the stakeholders, is really important. And so, we shouldn't ever view anyone in this conversation as an adversary. And
Exactly.
so, I would say this to parents, to students, to administrators, to school committee members, to community partners. Partnership should be the key word.
Exactly. That's it. Thank you for saying that. I think that's foundational, but I'm glad you articulated it. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Like I said, this is our resolve moving forward. We have a lot of work to do, but we have the passion, the talent, and the dedication to make a difference. And I'm looking forward to the work. So I don't have any citizens' comments. I didn't receive any. So we will move to new district. So the district physician contract. Elaine, would you make a motion relative to that, please?
Sure. So I move to authorize the superintendent, make sure I'm not muted, to sign the 2020-2021 school year physicians contract between the district and Dr. Russell Coleman. Dr. Coleman will receive a $2,000 stipend under the terms of the contract.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, questions, discussion? Elaine.
I just have a quick question. I know that this is fairly standard and we do this every year. Does this role need to be expanded given that we are in the middle of a pandemic and there's going to be a lot of medically based decisions that need to be made moving forward? Is $2,000 going to cover it, basically?
So Lisa, we'll turn this over to you.
Okay, to be quite honest with you, I consult with him regularly, but I have throughout the year anyways, regardless of COVID-19 or not. We utilize him quite often for a lot of array of things, not just a pandemic, right? He reviews healthcare plans if I feel that I need his input. Based on parents need more support, students need more support, or staff do. He also signs standing orders, etc. So I utilize him quite a bit. He's, to be honest with you, he's never asked for more, and my understanding, he always answers me, and it's never been like he's got so many hours and I've overused it. That's not to say that I won't overuse him this year, but between the Department of, I have other resources besides Dr. Coleman. He is always part of that decision making. We also utilize our local Board of Health and other resources that I have. So I don't anticipate that it's going to increase this year. He hasn't indicated that at all.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Okay, so I'm going to call the vote. All in favor, Elaine?
Yes.
Kathy, yes. Steve? Steve? Okay, Joseph?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
And Mike? Yes. Thank you. Okay, so we have, the next item is
Thank you, Lisa.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Our next item is to revote the MSBA article. Brooke, do you need to say anything? Or
Yeah, I'm just going to explain what I sent out in the email to you, just so that people understand why we are doing this. So there is statute here, just to go back to the process that we take when the regional school district has made the decision to borrow money. As soon as that decision is made, i.e. the vote is taken, then the school district has 7 days to notify its towns that it is doing this. So by that means basically that I would send an email, or Pat would send an email out to our 3 town administrators. And then they take it to their board of selectmen, and basically it starts a 60-day clock as such. And so within this, and we were really conscientious of this when we did it the first time with the town administrators, because we knew that that 60 days, the town meeting at that point in time was long before the pandemic came, that we knew that the town meetings would happen within the 60-day time period. Because what happens if it isn't voted on by a town, like a town meeting or such, then it's like, and they don't notify us back, it's as if the towns have given tacit approval to go ahead and borrow. And when we had the leak, I'm going to step out of this current situation and go back to the leach field and oil tank situation. So when we were going to borrow for that particular set of projects, we did everything appropriately. We took the vote, we let our town administrators know, and then the town administrators went to their board of selectmen. And basically the option was, are we going to take this to town meeting, or are we going to run the 60-day clock out? So for example, Stowe didn't put it on their town warrant that year, last year, because he said, we're just going to let the 60-day clock run out to give tacit approval to the school district to go ahead and borrow. Bolton played it differently. They did put it on the their warrant, and so did Lancaster. Then Lancaster, when they didn't accept it and we had to go back and do something different, they decided then that they would let it run out. So this whole 60-day thing has been in play for us already as a school district in my tenure here. So here we are again. So we took the vote way back when, I think it was in April, but clearly our 60 days has run out. Now, in talking to MSBA, because of course we're not the only school district in that position, you know, they said, well, one of the things that you can think about is that right now, if the meetings were to happen before the end of June, which in our case would hold true for potentially Lancaster and Bolton, because it looks like both those communities are going to go forward. There was a bit of a wait and see, like a hold that was put on. So we wouldn't have had to have worried about it, except Stowe did not take that route. They have canceled, meaning they're going to go beyond the July 1st. So we really do need to restart that 60-day clock, because none of us would ever want to assume that we have tacit approval for $1.5 million. So it really is just housekeeping. There's no difference. There's no difference to the motion, but the two sets of lawyers, like our set of lawyers and MSBA said, well, we'll go back now and just take a look and see if we want to make any little minor changes. I think they put the word schematic in there, for example. That's all. It's just for verge. There's no change in the substance or anything else. And really the only purpose for doing this is to reset the 60-day clock. If Stowe decides that it's going to have its meeting much later, let's say September, October, we will likely have to come back and do another revote. So I'm just giving you that forewarning right now. So it's really out of respect, I think, for the law, out of respect for our communities. And so that's why we're doing this revote tonight.
Okay.
I know Elaine's probably been practicing because it's a long motion, a long
I'm
vote.
gonna do it with no breaths. She's just gonna.
I have it memorized at this point.
I bet she do.
Okay, would you read the motion, please? Elaine?
Yes, so it's sort of in three parts. First, we're going to rescind the old vote, and then we're going to redo the vote. Voted that the vote of the Neshoba Regional School District, parentheses, the district, adopted on April 16th, 2020, which vote, among other things, authorized the borrowing of $1.5 million to pay costs of a school feasibility study with respect to the reconstructing the existing district high school or constructing a new district high school, is hereby rescinded. Further voted that the Neshoba Regional School District hereby appropriates the amount of $1,500,000 for the purpose of paying costs of a schematic design and feasibility study for the purpose of a building/modernization project of Neshoba Regional High School, 12 Green Road, Bolton, Mass. 01740, including the costs incidental and related thereto, parentheses, the study, said amount to be expended under the direction of the Neshoba Regional High School Building Committee. To meet this appropriation, the district is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to MGL Chapter 71, Section 16D, and the district agreement as amended, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The district acknowledges that the Massachusetts School Building Authorities, parentheses, MSBA's, grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA, and any cost the district incurs in excess of any grant approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the district, provided further that the amount of borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the feasibility study agreement that may be executed between the district and the MSBA. Notwithstanding the provisions of MGL Chapter 71, Section 16D, no amount shall be borrowed or expended pursuant to this vote if any member town of the district shall have voted to disapprove of the debt authorized hereby on or before September 30th, 2020. Further voted that within 7 days from the date on which this vote is adopted, the Secretary be and hereby is instructed to notify the Board of Selectmen of each of the member towns of this district as to the amount and general purposes of the debt herein authorized as required by the district agreement and by Chapter 71, Section 16D of the general laws.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions, discussion? Yes, Elaine.
So I have a question. So I know that the September 30th date that's written in the motion now sounds like it's just part of that clock. If a town votes it down, do we then have to re-vote, and then would a town have to then, sorry, I'm not explaining this well. Let's say 2 of our 3 towns vote yes and 1 of them votes no, and we have to re-vote a motion as a school committees to then reset the clock to try to vote again for the town that voted no. Do the 2 towns that vote yes have to re-vote yes because we re-voted and now there's a new clock?
You know, that's a great question. I wouldn't want to speculate on an answer on that, to be honest with you. I think we'll wait and see what happens here, because I think that we would have, I'm probably going to go down a little bit different road than you might have anticipated. I think that we may have 1 or 2 other options available to us to explore other than the traditional town meetings. And I think that, again, I don't want to go into details on that because I don't know if that would even happen. So I don't want to create a what if right now, but I would suggest that we probably would look at potentially a different avenue, because there are other avenues, but the town meeting is the cleanest for sure.
Okay.
Would we be looking at the nuclear option at that point? If one town
Potentially.
votes it no, yeah.
Potentially, Steve, yes. 16N is what Steve is referring to. Yeah.
Any other questions for the discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. Elaine?
Yes.
Kathy? Yes. Steve?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Brett? Did you say yes?
Reading his lips, he said yes.
Okay, thank you. Leah?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
And Mike? Mike?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You little soft. Okay, so that has been passed. So the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's evaluation. So to provide an introduction and just a tiny bit of background, the Massachusetts Department of Education's model system for educator evaluation is a comprehensive evaluation system developed pursuant to Education Evaluation Regulations 603 CMR 35. The model system was developed in 2012 to improve student learning by improving teaching and administrative leadership. The model system requires the following. Individual school committee members rate the superintendent's performance against the standards of administrative leadership. There are 4 of them. Standard 1 is instructional leadership. Standard 2 is management and operations. Standard 3 is family and community engagement. And standard 4 is professional culture. Individual school committee members render a single overall summative judgment of the superintendent's performance using the following ratings: unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, and or exemplary. The proficient practice is understood to be fully satisfactory, and this is the rigorous expected level of performance. Individual members of the school committee submit their evaluations of the superintendent to the school committee chair, who then compiles the individual ratings and drafts the summative evaluation. So that has been completed, and I actually sent the draft compilation to the committee for further feedback, and have received back feedback from several of the members. At a public meeting with the superintendent present, school committee members review the draft, discuss proposed revisions, and adopt a final summative evaluation report. This report is placed in the superintendent's personnel file, and the summative rating is submitted to the DESE. The superintendent's evaluation report is a public record. So what I'm going to do tonight, and this is the public presentation of the evaluation, is that I will go through the ratings, and then I will read the overall summary of performance. And then, as it is a public document, the specifics of the other standards are available. So in assessing progress towards goal, for the professional practice goal, there was significant progress. For the student learning goal, we found that that was met. And for the district improvement goal, we found that that was met as well. For the professional standards, instructional leadership, proficient. Standard 2, management and operations, proficient. Standard 3, family and community engagement, proficient. Standard 4, professional culture, proficient, with an overall summative performance rating of proficient. So at this time, I would like to read the summary. When I finish reading the summary, I will entertain a motion to accept the evaluation. There will be discussion and questions, and then a vote, and then I give Superintendent Clenchey an opportunity to speak to the evaluation. So that's the process we're going to follow. So again, these comments are a compilation of comments that from the individual evaluations. Superintendent Clenchey led our district during an atypical school year. 2 significant events diverted her full attention from the 2019-2022 District Improvement Plan, her work with the MSBA, and the normal day-to-day responsibilities of her profession, or her position. Superintendent Clenchey met the challenges she encountered this year, balancing the urgency of responding to crises and leading the district to make progress on the goals in the District Improvement Plan. During the unsettling periods this year, Superintendent Clenchey provided the school community, and often the community at large, with frequent communication. During the events of the fall, Superintendent Clenchey's communications were dictated by the advice of legal counsel. While Superintendent Clenchey acknowledges that following legal advice with regard to communication served the district well, she believes that it was not always what was best for the community. Because she heeded the advice of legal counsel, Superintendent Clenchey was widely criticized for communication that was sparse and uninformative. Superintendent Clenchey's decision to follow legal advice and to refrain from vindicating herself is indicative of a leader who puts the welfare of the district, and especially the welfare of the students of the district, before that of her reputation. When the reality of the COVID-19 pandemic became apparent, we anxiously awaited guidance from the DESE. Since none was forthcoming in a timely manner, Superintendent Clenchey considered what she was hearing from parents and public health officials in our 3 towns. Although the DESE was threatening sanctions if districts chose to suspend classes, Superintendent Clenchey decided to act in the best interest of the members of our school community, took the initiative to close our schools several days before the DESE came out with their decision to require districts to do so. Over the course of the past 3 months, Superintendent Clenchey has issued numerous communication with public health updates and resources, remote learning and support services for students and their family on how to access free breakfasts and lunches. These memos not only provided important information, they conveyed Superintendent Clenchey's genuine thoughtfulness and caring for staff, students, and their families. Because of Superintendent Clunchy's leadership, our transition from traditional learning to remote learning was smooth and represented tremendous thought, calibration, planning, and implementation. Family and students both benefited from this clear guidance during a very confusing and murky time. This year, Superintendent Clunchy led the district through the process that we hope will ultimately lead to a high school building project. In addition to working diligently with the MSBA, Superintendent Clunchy created a subcommittee composed of school committee members, students, parents, and teachers to create a campaign to educate the three communities about the need to pass a warrant to fund a feasibility study for a building project. Superintendent Clunchy's collaborative leadership style ensures that we have interested, committed, and thoughtful people working to support initiatives that will improve teaching and learning in our district. Superintendent Clunchy models and supports ongoing professional development for district administrators and principals to assure that their practices and protocols are in line with state regulations. She is actively involved with the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, the Assabet Valley Collaboratives Superintendent Group, and the Worcester County Superintendents Roundtable Group. Each of these organizations hosts professional development and networking opportunities. For example, Worcester County Roundtable Superintendents Association regularly brings in speakers who provide relevant information for superintendents in a small learning environment. It was here where Superintendent Clunchy first connected with an LGBTQ organization, which was brought in to do administrative training with central office leadership, principals, nurses, and guidance counselors. These professional organizations are also valuable resources for other school district interests, such as budget processes, issues and potential solutions, contract issues, student issues, for example, opioid addiction, homelessness, etc., staffing concerns, and parent concerns. As an effective leader actively engages in ongoing self-reflection and analysis of things that are working and things that are not. In dealing with crises, Superintendent Clunchy looked for opportunities to identify those things that she as a leader and that we as a school district could do better. As we move into the new school year and the unknowns associated with it, we will do so with protocols to guide district and school administrators in their work dealing with student and staff issues. We will begin the process for hiring a new high school principal, and we will expand our notion of social emotional learning to include promoting equity and acceptance. The school committee recognizes and appreciates the intelligence, dedication, caring, and tenacity that Superintendent Clunchy brings to her leadership role. In addition to the aforementioned goals for the upcoming school year, we would like to see her explore ways to connect with parents informally when we are not dealing with crises. We believe that more parents need to experience interactions with her to appreciate how valuable she is to our district as the superintendent. The school committee would also like to see the metrics, assessments, and analysis of those assessments for determining the efficacy of programs. This is the concluding paragraph. Superintendent Clunchy is a dedicated, highly competent, articulate, experienced, and compassionate district leader. Her appreciation of students and their learning is especially evident whenever she speaks about students at school meetings or interacts with students who present at school committee meetings. Her appreciation of faculty members and their work with students is also demonstrated at school committee meetings. At school committee and other meetings, her appreciation of our principals and the cohesion and productivity of their group is evident, as well as her appreciation of central office staff. Superintendent Clunchy builds strong groups through empowering talented individuals and then encouraging them to learn together and share their best practices and proven successes for the benefit of all students in the district. We often witness the benefits of that collaboration in the joint presentations on curricula and instruction that are made to the school committee. Superintendent Clunchy has a tremendous level of tenacity and optimism. Every challenge is met with the attitude of, okay, that's a challenge, but we'll figure it out. That spirit has been particularly helpful this past year as we dealt with crisis after crisis. Even the strongest among us were collapsing under the strain of potential Title IX abuse, the ensuing scandal and investigation, community outrage, a crumbling high school building, the historic decision to shut down schools, an instant switch to remote learning, economic impact and budget cuts, contract negotiations, reopening the schools amid COVID-19 concerns, and most recently, racial justice reflection and action plan. Somehow, Superintendent Clenchey has managed to effectively triage our current challenges and maintain the stamina to continue forward. We are fortunate that Superintendent Clenchey is the superintendent of Neshoba Regional School District. So I would like, if Elaine, you could make a motion to accept the evaluation.
I move to accept the 2019-2020 Superintendent Summative Evaluation as prepared and presented by the chair.
Thank you. Questions, discussion?
Second, you want a second?
Mary? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Mary will second.
I will.
Thank you, Mary. Questions, discussion? Mike?
Kathy, I first wanted to just thank you for consolidating all of these evaluations. I know that mine took an awful lot of time, and if you multiply that by the number of people on the committee and then your ability to kind of synthesize everything, it's probably a monumental task. I can't remember from last year, so just refresh my memory. Is the summative report the only public document, or are individual reports also public?
Because the individual reports are used to create the summary, they are public documents as well.
Great.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Elaine?
Oh, it's not really a question. I just wanted to say that I think we would all agree that this year was quite the roller coaster. It still is. It's a never-ending roller coaster now. And that it's sort of hard to capture that in any evaluation, because by nature you're trying to sum everything up into these short spurts, when really there was just so much content that could have gone in here. So thank you, Kathy, for trying to distill it all down. It was hard enough to do that even as an individual, but then to take 8 of them and try to merge it all into one. Yeah, but just to impress upon everybody that's watching that, like, even we understand that there's a lot in there that didn't necessarily make it into specific words. The kids are trying to come in. You know, specific sentences and evidence and words in there, but that, like, we recognize that was all part of this year as well.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Joseph.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's more of a comment than a question that's really not related to the superintendent's performance. So I'll start with my comment. First and foremost, as one member of this committee and as a parent of a student in the district, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, I want to thank the superintendent for the leadership she showed us back in March in initiating a school closure in the wake of the COVID-19 situation. I hope it's common knowledge among our district that the superintendent acted before the state and before the commissioner acted in this regard. And whether history proves us right in our actions or wrong, I just want to say thank you. And I think that what you showed was excellent leadership in the face of that situation. And my question really, when I was reading through the evaluation, it sort of just jumped out at me. It wasn't something that I'm not sure if this was presented to the committee. I don't think it was. So the evaluation talks about the state, the commissioner's office imposing sanctions. And what exactly were those sanctions they were threatening to impose? I was just curious about that.
I think they were empty threats.
Oh, okay. All right. That's all right. That's all I want to.
Just from my experience, I think the concern was that the concern that the school districts might not meet the regulations for a whole school year.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yes.
The 185 days comes into play, and you know,
Right.
I can still remember the phone call when I made it to let them know that I had decided to do this, and immediately it was, well, why are you doing this? What is the rationale behind doing this? We don't understand this. So it wasn't as, please don't think that it was a smooth process because it wasn't at that point in time. But again, it was, as Kathy said, it was before, but literally just days before the governor came out and made his decision. So at that point in time, when I'd made the decision, it was just a sliver early, I think. And because we were really just one of a handful, I think probably across Commonwealth, at that point in time, it was not being viewed through a positive lens.
But all the cool superintendents were doing it.
I don't know about that.
Any other questions?
I'm grateful to our legislators, because when I called the legislators and told them that I was looking for their support, they were fabulous.
Thank you. Leah? Yes.
Okay, so I guess I have a clarifying question for you on process. So I know that at this point, Brooke has been on a 1-year cycle for a while.
Yes.
At this point, are we going to move toward a 2-year cycle for her?
I think that that's a discussion for personnel to generate with, and the new, whoever is on personnel, but we certainly can make that decision for the upcoming school year. We don't have to do anything right now. And I know when Dorothy mentioned it, everybody sort of like, yeah, why don't we do that?
Well, I know it's a ton of work to go through this process. So new people who are new are put on 1-year cycles, and it's just a big, huge, heavy lift, and it's hard to show you're accomplishing goals within a 1-year period of time. And you have to oftentimes show your results far before the end of the school year, which is also awkward. So anyway, I would be in favor of a 2-year cycle.
And that's a new, because I hadn't heard of that before. You're right. The analogy between, with the teachers and the cycle based on where you are in your professional status. So
yeah, so I think my ultimate question is this. So there are a couple of areas within the evaluation that Brooke noted as a place where where the administration needs to improve. I agreed with it. Your summative evaluation that you just read also agreed with it. So as a matter of process, do we now see those things, those places where the progress was not totally met? Do we see those roll into the next set of goals?
That's typically the process, in that you look from my experience, you look at the areas that need more work or that weren't complete, and you use those to formulate goals for the upcoming year. And I think that's true. It's true of administrators. It's true of teachers. And, for folks who might not be familiar with the process, this is the same process that are in similar standards for educators, teachers, administrators, and superintendents. So that's the plan. And if you can remember back to October, which I don't even, it seemed like many years ago, we identified some of those areas in particular, and Brooke noted, and as we did in the previous year's evaluation, concerns relative to culture and climate at the high school, and that was part of the plan this year. Yes, Leah.
So I guess getting to the meat of my point here is the thing that you just read, Kathy, was, in my opinion, very positive, and I think rightfully so. There are a couple of points that I wanted to highlight just for the record. Mm-hmm. So point one is, I think that Brooke has done an outstanding job with her organizational leadership. That is an absolute strength that she brings to the table that is total behind the scenes work that nobody but us and your administrative team, sometimes not even the teachers, certainly not the parents, see. So I wanted to just highlight the fact that I believe that your organizational leadership is such an asset, especially the year that we've had. Your ability to interface with all of the bureaucratic elements in public education is absolutely understated in our world. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is that the culture and climate thing at the high school is clearly very important to me. I want to very much see it at the forefront of all we do, considering it's really the one area where very little progress was made in the way that we originally intended. But the thing that I wanted to point out too is that culture and climate and all that we're trying to accomplish is really about, what are we teaching the kids? It's all about teaching and learning. And so I wanted to just highlight the fact that curriculum matters, and how that curriculum is being brought to the children and how it's being assessed is all about equity. So hopefully we can also see more of that pushing through, especially for the high schoolers, because I think that that is a place where we have a lot of growth yet to be made, is shoring up curriculum, instruction, and assessment at the high school.
Yeah, I think that that is mentioned is under one of the other standards. Let me see if I can find it. But my question to you is, do you want the document amended to reflect that in the initial summation?
I don't. So I think that you know what I wrote, and that is that in like all things considered, I think that Brooke's leadership is proficient, but I think that if you drill down to the different divisions of our public school system, it varies, I think, widely. So I just wanted to call attention to that. The other thing that I just wanted to say really quick, sorry, is the communication piece is also something that you highlighted and that should be elevated to the top. I think that Brooke's strength is to call attention to the stellar people who she has around her, and that you, Brooke, don't look for the spotlight. You don't want to talk about how great you are. It's not your style. And as a result, I think that that void sometimes gets filled by other voices. So I would say that you should try to do a little bit more of that informal communication where you create relationships and alliances within the community, like the report says. I think that that is actually, it's probably the hardest part. It's those soft skill things that take time. And time is really at an all-time minimum for you and for your administration. So I would just like to reiterate that, say that it's super important. If everybody in these towns could know you on the level that we do, and the level that your administrators do, I think that they would be, nailing down your shoes in the district, not letting you ever think about going anywhere. So
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you, Leah.
And I think some of what you mentioned is in the body among the specific things, but as we create goals next year to work over 2 years, we can make sure there's specificity to the things that you mentioned relative to curriculum. Mary.
So I would have said more, but Leah said so much of what I would have said. So thank you, Leah. And you said it so beautifully. I wanted to thank you, Kathy, for your work in putting this together, and also to acknowledge all of the members of the school committee, because so much reflection and thought went into this. And I hear myself in that, but I also hear other voices who brought, it really seems to me that the wisdom of the group came forward in regard to this. And most of all, because we lived through this year with Brooke, and yet in our positions, we weren't privy to all that Brooke was privy to, so that there was trust that she had built with us, and that's what we were able to go on, and that paid off. But I do want to thank Brooke, and what Leah said about working directly with her, you realize not only is she highly competent and her experience comes to bear so well, but the kindness that she, and we are in the people business. We are with our students, and I think parents have especially realized this year with teaching their students and doing things remotely, how much our educators, our teachers, and everyone involved is involved in bringing up the children of our district. And so for the leader to be a person of kindness, even in the face of some of the reaction of only a small percentage of parents, which we also heard as school committee, but to see the grace that Brooke took it with and her optimism going forward, we are fortunate that she is our superintendent, and I hope she stays a long time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, did we haven't voted yet, have we?
No.
Okay. Okay, because I asked for discussion. All right, I'm gonna move the vote. The relative to accepting the evaluation of Superintendent Clenchey for 2019, 2020. Elaine,
Yes.
Kathy, yes. Steve,
Yes.
Joseph,
Yes.
Brett, Leah,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
and Mike.
Yes.
Thank you. Brooke, would you like to say anything?
I would, thank you very much. So a couple of things, Kathy, I said this to you this weekend too, when I saw, I don't think I've ever seen an evaluation with so much detail for a superintendent as this particular evaluation. And I said to Kathy, I don't know how many hours you spent on this. And I was teasing her. I said, I got a text at like 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, but I thought, sometimes your texts come through a little slow. So I thought maybe it was one, something had come through a little slower. Now, not to say that Kathy and I have not spent several nights texting between 2 and 4 in the morning, because that has happened. So I asked her, I said, I didn't respond because I didn't think that you were looking for that. She said, no, she said, but it was me. And I was texting you at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said, well, what were you doing? She said, doing this. And I know that it was probably countless hours. I'm sure that you can't even quantify the number of hours that you put into it. But on the receiving end, I would tell you that it was probably one of the best evaluations I've received in terms of, now not in terms of the the check and that kind of thing, not that, but from the lens of looking at details that I can work with. I loved that at the bottom of every section, there was a little section there that I could really literally pull from and use as we move forward as a district and myself. And I was so respectful and appreciative of that. So just the way that it was laid out and the amount of detail I thought it was just so incredibly well done. And Mary, you talked about hearing voices. I could almost hear voices as I was reading through it as well. And so I think, Kathy, you captured that beautifully too. So I'm so appreciative of that. I would say too, it was interesting because, and we had as Todd had alluded to earlier, we had a really big and long meeting. I think it was Friday afternoon, or Monday, maybe it was Monday. And we were kind of in the middle of the think tank moment as we were going through, and somebody put up their hands and I won't identify that person and said, we just want to thank you right now. And I'm sure that Todd can remember that moment in time. And I thought, and I stopped too. And I said, we are, as leaders, as Todd and I are leaders in the district, we are only ever as strong as that layer below us, in terms of helping to keep us buoyant and do the really good work that our team does. So a lot of times when I feel that I'm being successful, I think it's just because our team is successful. But that gets also back to Leah, your point, and you're right. I am not somebody culturally or personally or professionally who's ever needed a lot of limelight, and that doesn't always serve me well. And so your point is well taken, and I understand that. I think professionally, I've always wanted to tap the shoulder of up and coming leaders, and so I've always tended to put more of a lens there than on myself. And that doesn't always necessarily serve me well, but personally, it's who I am. And so you're right, I don't need a lot of limelight. I just never have. So I appreciate you recognizing that, because it's also a fault, I would say too, the notion of it not being a typical year was a very atypical year in so many ways. And I know I've said this before. I know that I've certainly taken my share of criticism for the first component in terms of dealing with our first crisis situation. But even in self-reflection, when I look back, I know that I did the right thing. I know it wasn't right by PR standards or perhaps community member standards, but I know that it was the right decision, and sometimes even by my own. but I know that it was the right thing to do for the district, and I have no regrets. Although some people might think that I would, I don't, you know. It was the right thing to do for the district. And we sit here this many months after with a pretty clean desk as a result of that. And so I do not begrudge or regret the approach that we took. I would say too, you know, the amount of stress that you are under, that's alleviated in a lot of ways by having a strong team under you. And in my situation, I also have a strong team above me in terms of the school committee. And I am so blessed to have such bright people lead me to help lead the district. So there, you know, when I think about, or I talk to other superintendents about school committee, I rate this particular school committee high and above any others, because you don't hesitate to call me out, and I'm okay with that. You don't hesitate to say, hey, have you thought about this? Or would you maybe steal this idea here or that idea? And some of you, it's so fun for me to deal with it, because one or two of you are like, maybe five words in a sentence to an email to me. Others will write pages to me. And I appreciate and respect both, because you're so thoughtful and reflective. And I think that serves me well, and that serves the district well. And I think the last thing I would say is I recognize, and I hope that I lead by example, I am a lifelong learner. That's an old saying. I know that. That's probably from, I don't know, the 80s or 90s, but it's who I am. And I think, you know, I don't know how many times Kathy and I have had this discussion about taking the high road, even though no one else is on that road with you right now. We'll keep taking that high road. But you know what? It serves us well. And I continue to learn. And I love learning. I love research. I love looking into what other districts are doing. And I think that that's one of the reasons Todd and I work so well together, because we're both like that. We have strengths in different areas. And I think that serves us, the team and our district well. And so I think part and parcel of the reason I'm successful is because I have a great professional partner to work with all the time. And he's not afraid to tell me too, I don't think that's a good idea. You know? And Alita is the same, and she knows that too. How many times do I say in a day I miss having Alita there to just run stuff by? You know, this is such a strange and crazy time for us to work through. But honestly, when I say surrounded by the best, I mean that. I am surrounded completely between my school committee and the administrative team and those that I work with. I am surrounded by the best right now, and I don't ever take that for granted. So I thank you, all of you.
Well, thank you. Yes, Steve,
I would like to say something.
go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. My first year on the school committee, I was totally impressed with the breadth of knowledge and just the day-to-day things that go on that Brooke showed. I can remember her discussion about a broken culvert in Bolton that she was concerned about, and rerouting the school buses and all this kind of stuff. And my opinion of her has only increased over the last 3 years, which certainly feel like 30 or 40 at this point. However, the situation in March, where she was head and shoulders above the kind of guidance we were getting from DESE, and I would like to make note that I am particularly not happy with the guidance that was provided by DESE and continues to be provided by DESE.
So noted.
At this juncture, not being able to make a decision on graduations, not being able to make any kind of a early decision on what we're going to look like in the fall, and a whole bunch of other things, not making a decision on who we're going to pay and who we're not going to pay, and the school buses and this and that and everything else. Quite truthfully, I'm very, very disappointed in the hierarchy of the educational structure of the state. And if I ever have my opportunity, I will make it known to the people involved. However, I am certainly impressed with Brooke and have become more and more impressed with her during the 3 years of this term. And if I get elected again, I look forward to working with her over the next 3 years, because we got a lot of work to do. And we're gonna make her work even harder over the next 3 years. And I want to personally say thank you, Brooke, for everything you've done and your leadership.
I really appreciate that.
I know sometimes I can be a pain, but that's
you just keep me on my toes, Steve.
Okay, any other comments? Oh, Mike, hi, go ahead.
I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. And this is largely for the community that might be listening or watching, and maybe for those of us on the committee that are quite familiar with the evaluation. The purpose of the evaluation is not to provide the committee an opportunity to install criticism or point out any glaring deficiencies. It's not an opportunity for a reckoning. And on the opposite side, it's certainly not. The purpose is not also to install undue praise, fluffy, warm and fuzzy feelings. The purpose of the evaluation, quite frankly, is to provide an opportunity for growth. And I will say that this being my second evaluation, and the first year having seen what followed the first evaluation, if that makes sense, I can say that the superintendent really does take those opportunities for growth to establish either ongoing goals or to revise them and amend them into new, more maybe current goals. And I could not agree more that that is the very definition of lifelong learning. So that's sort of a neutral statement, but I do want to be clear that these are just ways for the school committee to provide areas of challenge where we can say, how can we do things better? And I think that the superintendent really does a good job of reflecting and revising from one evaluation to the next year. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mike. Any other comments? Okay, thank you so much, and thank you, Brooke.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the school committee organizational meeting. Regulations require that after the town elections, we have the school committee has a reorganizational meeting or an organizational meeting. It's like the new term of the school committee. We anticipate adding 3 new members based on the, I can't remember what we called it, the reapportionment or whatever we did, we got 3 more members. So
Mary's work. You can call it Mary's work. Mary's work.
What Mary did. So the issue seems to be that 2 of the towns are going to have their town meetings and elections next week. We don't know when Stowe's going to have theirs.
No, their election is still the 27th. I have not heard anything different on that.
Isn't it?
The town meeting maybe will change, but the town election will not.
Elaine, is that true?
Yeah, Steve's right. Yeah, you don't have to double check with me.
No, but I thought you were going to say something. I wasn't. Steve, it's not that I didn't believe you. So, okay. So then if we're looking at that, I'm getting the calendar. So the 20, boom, boom, boom. So wait, Stowe's election is on the 27th, but Lancaster's is on the 29th. No,
Monday?
it's not. Is it on a Saturday? Joe?
I thought all.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought all towns had it the same date. I'm sorry. I thought maybe I'm mistaken. I thought we're all on the same date on the 29th.
Well, I don't know. I'm mailing mine in, so it doesn't matter to me.
Maybe
But
I'm
in any
mistaken.
event, whenever we have to have a organizational meeting within 10 days. So that brings us to and I'm assuming it's 10 business days. So 1, 2.
Why not the 1st of July, Wednesday night?
1st of July. Is
That'll-
that I happen to have nothing scheduled on the 1st of July. Would that work for folks? All right.
It
Steve?
doesn't have to be a long meeting, that particular meeting either, right?
No, I think that we will welcome new members. we will, I think we have one outstanding item that we had to move from a couple of agendas that we'll get to shortly. So if the school committee is comfortable with having an organizational meeting on July 1st, Elaine, would you give us that motion?
Yes, I move to add a school committee organization meeting on July 1st, assuming at 6 p.m. to the 2020-2021 meeting calendar.
Second, please.
Second,
You seconds. I'll take the vote. All in favor, Elaine?
Yes.
Kathy? Yes. Waiting for me to respond. Steve?
yes.
Brett? Leah?
Yes.
Okay, Mary?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And Mike?
Yes.
Okay. So we will meet on July 1st. When the new members have been sworn in, I will reach out and let them know. I'll work with Anne Marie because we have to do a whole orientation thing as well. All right, that was surprisingly easy. Okay, so the next thing would be our retreat. The school committee has a retreat. Usually we have it today, but that's not happening today. So I'm not sure what folks think about if we push it out until August. There may be subcommittee work that people might be able to do over the summer. I don't know. So I'm interested in folks thinking about our retreat. What I'd like to focus on, we have some outstanding goals from this year. I think there is some policy work that needs to be looked at. We had goals around revising the role of the student representative to the school committee and student voice. So I would like to put those things in. I know that we are required by our own bylaws to review our protocols, but we might be able to do that at a meeting early in the year. So I see the retreat as really an opportunity to discuss our plans for engaging in the anti-racism initiatives. Brooke?
I think we'll also be wanting to take a look at the district improvement plan around at that point in time too. And I think we're holding back right now on doing a lot of work on that until we know what we're doing with our reopening.
Okay.
So that probably should be at some point in time, we'll want to have a meeting, just discuss that.
Sure. Mike?
Directly to Brooke's point, one of the reasons why I love the summer is because my Wednesdays suddenly open up. But should we be considerate of the fact that there might be a lot of district-based decisions on how and when and the manner in which we reopen?
I think Brooke's going to speak to that shortly. So what I'd like to get a sense from you folks about is, it seems to me, because I agree, I think this committee has worked so hard this year and put in the hours and have had such thoughtful discussions that I think we all, everybody kind of needs a break. Now that being said, there are decisions that need to be made, and our retreat last year was to set some goals. So I would like to be able to perhaps reach out to the group later in the summer to see if we could do a retreat date closer to the start of school, if that would make sense. However, I would like to be able to pull together a subcommittee to inform the work of the retreat. And if anyone would be interested in doing that, and I'm not saying we meet every week or anything, but I think that would be helpful, certainly helpful. Yes, Leah.
So I think last year where we ran into some trouble at our retreat was the district improvement plan was presented, but then we had a lot of questions.
Yes.
So I don't necessarily mind when we do things, just as long as we are given an opportunity to either offline, online, kind of discuss that in draft form so that then they can finalize for the first day
Okay.
where they're doing their early PD.
Yep. Okay. Mike, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just, not that the decision has to be made now, but I would volunteer to be part of that subcommittee. I mean, I've got more time in the summer, so I can certainly.
Okay. All right, and folks can think about, oh, Brooke, yes.
Yeah, and I was saying, I don't know if, Mike, this is the road that you're going down, but, because we don't know what we're up against right now, and again, we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but with reopening, I mean, we were scheduled to have a call with the commissioner with additional guidance this week, and I would let you know that as of tonight, it's Wednesday night, we have, unless something came through in the last little bit, Todd, that I haven't seen, I don't believe that there's a call scheduled right now. So here we sit, but yet again, so I think that this is maybe where Mike was going. We may be in a situation this summer where we are just going to have to call together a couple of short meetings if we've got some decisions that need to be made. So I think it's kind of like if we just plan on being all on notice in case.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I'm just to respond to that. It seems like right now we're in this holding pattern, and it's sort of quiet and slow moving, but there's this storm coming, and as soon as the state issues what their mandate is, we're going to have to we're going to have to really scramble to organize that in a way that makes sense for this district and these towns. So sorry.
We'll have that. Brooke is going to.
Yeah, let me go through what we're
As
at.
usual, she's a couple steps ahead of the state of Massachusetts. So I'm not, we're going to iron out the details. All right. So we're going to put we'll look at dates. Maybe we may have a better idea in a couple of weeks on July 1st, but I'll move that to that agenda as well. To July 1. Okay.
Well, all I know is that both New Hampshire and Florida are fully open and available in case we want to relocate where we have our meeting.
Thank you. New Hampshire maybe because Joe has a house.
I vote for Florida.
Definitely not, especially Steve.
In the summer, not in the summer.
That's the last place we want to be. Anyway, okay, sorry. All right. So we're moving that to the agenda. Okay, so we have a couple of more motions to consider. The first one, Mary modified. We brought it forward a couple of months ago that it had been put forward by the Boston Teachers Union, and Mary adapted it to be relevant to us, and it is directed to our state representatives to the federal government, Elizabeth Warren, Ed Markey, Laurie Trahan, and James McGovern. And there are a lot of whereases that I trust everyone has read, but the resolved is that the chairperson and members of the Neshoba Regional Committee urge the Massachusetts congressional delegation, including our United States senators and House of Representatives, to advocate for additional federal education funding for our nation's public schools. So we have a motion that Elaine will read.
I move to adopt the Neshoba Regional School Committee in support of increased federal support and stimulus funding for public K-12 education resolution.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
Oh, thank you, Mary. Discussion or questions? Leah?
I think that you were kind of on this a while ago. I wonder, do we know of any movement beyond our school committee? Is there like more momentum in any corner of the world on this?
I don't know. I don't have any information from MASC. My personal feeling is that I think it's the right thing to do on behalf of the district and the kids in our district. And I think that, but I don't have any information from like MASC if other districts did something like this. But I personally feel it's an important statement to make So I'm in support of it, but you know, where are you guys at? Elaine?
First, thank you, Mary, for doing the work to make it more relevant to Neshoba, because this started in Boston originally. And to answer Leah's question, I haven't seen one thing that's sort of moving through everyone, but I have seen teachers associations in different states starting to put together things, and different groups in different states all pointing toward the federal government saying that we need help with this.
Any other questions or comments? Mary?
But I do want to recognize Boston Public Schools, because we really took most of the language. But also, I believe in the House that there is another bill, and which would have more funding, and whether that would pass in the Senate is always something. So this is still relevant, and all those organizations, AASA, School Superintendent Association. I also read the Association of School Business Officials are really worried about money, Pat, and so that they're in favor of that too. So this is still, unfortunately, no, it's still relevant. We should still send it, and to all those, to all the people that this one pertains to.
Okay. Other comments? I'm going to call the vote. Elaine, in favor, those in favor of sending this forward to our elected representatives. Elaine?
Yes.
Kathy? Yes. Steve?
Yes, but it's a waste of time. It is.
Thank you. Brett? Okay. Leah?
Yes.
Mary?
But it's not a waste of time necessarily. If we don't send it, it's a waste of time.
Mayor, Mike?
Yes, and agreed, not a waste of time.
Thank you. Joseph?
Yes.
Okay. It appears that this has passed, and we will make sure it gets to the right hands. And then the next resolution is a little shorter, and this is relative to COVID-19 state funding. Whereas if schools are to reopen this fall in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic, it is the responsibility of each school district to do so safely and responsibly. And whereas it is the responsibility of the state to ensure that each school district is able to pay for the enormous additional staffing, transportation, and material expenses required to do this. And whereas the state cannot expect mandatory COVID-19 safety guidelines to be followed without also ensuring that each school district has the funds required to implement these guidelines. Therefore, let it be resolved that the state must guarantee every school district full reimbursement for whatever COVID-19 expenses are required to follow state mandates. We must ensure a statewide school reopening that is safe, responsible, and equitable. There can be no unfunded mandates for COVID-19. Would you read the motion, please, Elaine?
Yes, I move to adopt the Neshoba Regional School Committee COVID-19 state funding resolution.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Second.
I think Leah beat you to it. Discussion, questions? Hearing, seeing none, I'll call the vote. Elaine?
Yes, and statewide, this is an equity issue. So enthusiastically, yes.
Kathy? Yes. Brett? Leah?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Steve, did I call on you or not?
No, I thought you were leaving me out of it this time, but okay.
No, I could never do that. Steve, what do you say?
I say yes, we got a better shot at this.
Oh, Mary?
Yes again.
Okay, and Mike?
I would say a yes that's more optimistic than Steve's.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so.
And Joseph?
No.
Joseph?
Vote. What?
I didn't hear Joseph's vote.
Oh, Joe.
Yes.
Okay, we're good. So Alita, we'll trust you to get these into the right mailboxes? She's got it. Okay. Very good. All right. So now we have a budget update. Pat. Oh, are you muted?
I'm unmuted.
Okay.
I'm just trying to bring up the document in front of me. Hold on one second.
Okay.
So I presented to you where I think we're going to land at the end of this fiscal year. I've gone over just about every line and tried to estimate just about every scenario for spending, necessary spending, I might say.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like at this point, and again, I wanted to say that this is a projection. There are things that can come up between now and the end of the year. One thing in particular are the assessments for school choice and for charter schools. Those are always something that we don't know until the end because of the SPED component of that. But this is as close to estimate as I can get at this point. And I think that puts us in a pretty good position. We're replacing what we used for revenue in this fiscal year going into next year, because I think next year we need to make sure that our E&D is in a place where if we need the funding from E&D, it is there. And that's the purpose of E&D, so that if you have an emergency like COVID-19, you can dip a little deeper into that, into those funds without adversely affecting the member communities. So does anybody have any questions about any of the numbers on this report right now?
I'm trying it. Wait a second. I got to get rid of everybody. Goodbye. All right, let me see.
And Kathy, can I just speak to this?
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Brooke.
The one thing that we want to continue to point out, though, now that's a projection, but please keep in mind that 800,000 of that definitely needs to go back. At least 800,000 goes back into E&D, because that's the amount of money that we borrowed this year.
Right.
So keep that in mind, and keep in mind that what we have committed for next budget year from E&D is 1 million. So you can see that this is going to put us right in that spot that we will have basically kept enough money or have enough money left over from this year to put into our E&D that we will turn around and borrow from again next year.
Okay, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, of the $813,000 that you're showing, 800 goes back into E&D, and then we have the 13,000. Does this touch at all upon our vehicle replacement program or not?
No, we have not. I have not put any vehicle replacements in this budget.
Okay, we're just not going to do it this year. Okay.
Right.
And let's see, my other question.
I mean, that has been the process, Steve, in past years where I have presented at year end, but I didn't think.
I know.
Seeing we're going forward that it was as necessary as some other things.
Okay. But we would certainly will need to do it next year, though. I just want to put that out there, because otherwise we're going to find ourselves in the same position, and we still have vehicles that are in horrible shape.
Once again, we've got to start thinking about putting this in the budget and not making it the first thing we cut out, which is what tends to.
We say that every year, Steve. Every year.
I know. I know.
Okay.
But if poor Rob has to put his foot on the brake and it goes through the floor of the truck, that's not a good thing. Okay.
Any other, Steve, do you have anything else?
No, that's really the only question I had. Just want to make it clear.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Mary, was your hand? Oh, Steve, I'm sorry. Mike, and then Mary.
Pat, I just want to be clear at what we're looking at. I think over the past several weeks to months, we've been talking about really not knowing how the budget is going to shake out in terms of us being in the plus or in the minus. Does this basically suggest that we're $813,000 in the plus. And
Yes, we're in the plus.
And so that, and because we're in the plus, we can safely put 800 of that 813 into
Right.
But in the end, with all the unexpected and unforeseen expenses and savings, I guess we ended up being in the plus. Is that what this is saying?
Yes, that's what it's saying. But there are a couple of factors that you have to keep in mind. First of all, we weren't lighting the buildings all day. We weren't heating them. We have, I think Brooke is going to speak a little bit further, she and I will further about a reduction in our payment for transportation. You can see that in the system-wide line as far as the transportation goes. So we had some surpluses in some of those lines that I just want you to keep in mind.
Actually, why don't we touch base on the buses at this point in time, Pat?
Right. So I think I spoke to you before about this. There are a number of communities in our area that use e-bus, and a group of us, I think there are 11 total, that we decided to group together and negotiate with a reduced rate for the remaining months. There's some communities that were paying in full. There are some communities that were paying 80%. We negotiated a 50% rate for the remaining number of days that the kids were transported. And keep in mind that we're not just paying them just pay them because of the contract obligation. It's we need to make sure that we have buses to transport our kids in the fall. And if every community decided not to pay them, I can almost guarantee that that bus company would not be in business.
And I think that there's a lot of work that happens during the summer with our bus companies too. And I think people don't realize that, because that's the time that they do all the work on the buses. So we've got, maintenance people there, mechanics that are there to make sure. So there's a lot of that kind of thing that is ongoing throughout this time period as well. So it's not just about bus drivers, it's about, the lease payments of the new buses, there's so much that goes into this. So I think that we felt that it was very fair at the 50% of these last couple of months. So it's not the whole year or anything, it's just those months that are affected by the pandemic.
Correct.
I think, Mary, did you have a question? Unmute. Mute, yeah, unmute. Yeah, Mary, did you have a question?
I do. Mary Rowlandson School. Just a reminder on why that is.
Well, I think if you look back at previous reports, you'll see that Mary Rowlandson School was running in a deficit, and it had to do with the fact that we had to add another kindergarten.
We had to add another, that's right. That's exactly why. So right out of the gate, I believe that we had to hire that teacher for September, if memory serves me right. So right out of the gate, it put Mary Rowlandson in a deficit.
And then the other factor that you have to keep in mind too is that full day kindergarten revenues disappeared for those months. And when that happened, the funds that were being charged to that revolving fund had to revert back to the regular appropriation, because we cannot run a revolving fund deficit. So that also made that climb a little bit higher. So you'll see that although we could cover some of the salary in that revolving fund, we could not cover all of it. And you'll see that in the other schools too, that there was an additional cost in the center and Florence Sawyer. They would have had a little bit more in surplus, I believe, in that.
So it kind of goes back to the notion that we might have saved on substitute teachers, but we didn't. It's how does, like I think, like Mike said, how does it all balance out at the end? And that's where you see. Pat, can I just go back and just, because I want to just point this out. I don't have this, and Alita, you don't need to put it up in front of me, but you've got the availables 813, and then you've got the projected as, I believe, 972. Is that right? If you take a look at the bottom numbers there, Pat. Bottom
Yes.
right, far right-hand column, available 813, projected 972. Just talk about the differential. Like what does that tell us?
The projected expenditures are telling you what I anticipate. Now, I started this projection on the 11th of June. So there's a payroll that's going to be posted as of today, and I had to take into account that. In that last payroll, there are vacation time payouts and everything else. So I had to accumulate all of that information. And a lot of that can't be done until the last minute, until the actual payroll is run.
Right.
The other thing is I have to estimate electricity costs and other things that were pending. There are some things that we put off till the very end, not knowing where we were going to land. If, the state mandated that we spend some money that we didn't have. I wanted to make sure that we did have it, because even if they say they're going to reimburse you for something, whether it be from FEMA or MEMA or whoever, you don't get it until the following fiscal year. So I have to keep this in mind when I'm doing these projections. So again, those expenditures have all been, they're all in the projected column.
And this it could still change. So I mean, remember that these are projections, and so this is her best estimate at this moment in time as of June 17th, 2020.
Right.
Mike, go ahead.
Sorry, Pat, while you're at it, I was wondering if you could just speak to the SPED line. I know that traditionally that line is relatively volatile in terms of being able to nail it, and given the budget allocated to SPED percentage-wise, it's not that terrible. But are there specific reasons as to why we're in the negative? And I wonder if that's part of allocating extra services through COVID-19.
We did apply for extraordinary relief and received a portion of that. So it would have been worse, basically, if we didn't receive the extraordinary relief, which we have to spend those funds in this fiscal year when we receive it. So I have accounted for that. But again, the extraordinary relief only takes a percentage of what additional costs that we did not have the opportunity for numerous reasons, which Joan could probably explain to you in more detail, what qualifies and what doesn't. And so again, going back to, we could have been a lot worse off, but we did receive some funding for extraordinary relief this year.
But just
why didn't we budget enough?
No, hang on, before we go there. Actually, in part, I want to go back to Mike's question if I can first, Steve, before your question, if we can just finish that up. I think that we said to you at the very beginning, we had more kids move in that required out of
exactly
placements, and that's really the bulk of that 140. Now, what Pat's talking about, you're really talking about circuit breaker coming back, right, Pat? That's what you're talking about here.
Well, actually, we received extraordinary relief in addition to our circuit breaker.
Right. And so between those lines, there will be some monies that come in to help support that, but they come in a year behind. But
right.
These are not things that we could have budgeted for or could have seen coming. And that's exactly to your point, Mike, that it's a volatile line because you just never know. You're absolutely right. You do the best projections as you can. Again, keeping in mind that we create that budget in basically January of the year before September hits, and then you don't know who your move-ins are going to be. And we had a fair number of move-ins this year that required out-of-district placements. So it wasn't something we could have planned for or budgeted for, which is why those two lines now kick into gear, the circuit breaker and the extraordinary relief.
Steve, did you have a comment or question?
No, that's all right.
Okay, other questions, comments for Pat? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, a reopening update. Brooke?
Sure. So
Wait.
Oh, wait.
Before, Aren't we at the end of our school bus contract?
We have an option in our contract to add an additional year.
Have we exercised that option yet?
Yes, we have exercised
Oh,
that.
okay. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Thank you.
Thanks for thinking of that, Steve. I appreciate that.
Okay, Brooke.
Reopening. So I think I'm looking for. There's Todd. Okay, I think that. Well, you kind of sometimes isn't that strange because you go where you know that the picture was and it's changed. And I think, where did he go? He was the bottom right. So we've started some discussions in terms of prepping for, and this is, I think Mike Horsch said it really well, was when he was articulating, we just really don't know, because you're right, we just really don't know. And in all fairness to the commissioner, and Todd and I have had this discussion, sometimes I wonder if he's waiting because as it goes on and on, our numbers continue to drop in terms of our COVID cases, in terms of the hospitalizations, in terms of the deaths. And so we're seeing positive outcomes right now as a result of the steps that I believe the state took in good faith to help keep us safe. And so I sometimes wonder if it's deliberate on the DESE's part to kind of hang tight a little bit more, because as we get closer, things are looking better and better. Maybe we won't have to do some of the measures that I think that they were thinking maybe 4 weeks ago we were going to have to put into play. So I do sometimes wonder if this isn't calculated. I know it's frustrating. I would say too that they certainly admitted in our last meeting, which was last week, they said a number of times, we know how frustrating this is. So, I appreciate that they know it, and including the budget, so for example, the CFO, the DESE CFO said, in all honesty, you may not know until school starts what the budgets are really going to be coming in. I've never seen anything like this before. I'm sure none of you have, if I haven't, and I think I'm probably, older than most of you. And I'm thinking, I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime. And so, it's hard. And I do appreciate the commissioner saying, listen, the new norm right now is living with this ambiguity. And I understand that. It's just frustrating living with the ambiguity. And for somebody like me who likes to be structured and well planned, and I've said this before, we're normally planned for our new school year in February, March, and we're just playing out the rest of the year because our eyes are already on September, October. So this, for us to be this late, is just, it's just so beyond description of how it feels, because it feels so unsettled, and you feel a little bit angry, you feel frustrated, you feel anxious, you feel all those feelings that are there. So we took a little bit of a different approach, and we said, you know what? We're going to start doing some planning. We're going to start doing some preliminary planning. But I don't want to do work that it's going to be unnecessary work. So we want to be thoughtful about it. So I think, Todd, let's bring up some of the thinking that we've had. And I know that you're going to jump in here too and talk about, again, we have such an amazing administrative team, and I feel so lucky to have this group of administrators to work with. And there's no two ways about it. When you've had the same component of administrators over the course of a couple of years, you find that you're able to get stronger and better and better. So this is some of our thinking. We've got 2 slides that we're going to present to you tonight. And Todd, why don't you start to talk this through, and I'll certainly add in some thinking as we go along.
Sure, great, thanks. So, we know that we're still waiting for the specific guidance from DESE on what the fall looks like in terms of what model that might be, whether it, there's been talk around whether it might be a hybrid model, what a hybrid model looks like in terms of what the schedule looks like or could look like, at different levels. As well as, when we got the remote learning guidance, we certainly at one point got the essential standards that they wanted everyone to cover throughout this school year, and each discipline and at each grade level. So that's really a lot of the meat of what we're still waiting for and looking to expect. But we certainly thought in the meantime, let's create the structure and the skeletal framework for this work, because once we create that and have all of the players and the key players on the key committees then we'll hit the ground running. And so what we did in one of our big meetings last week, it was Friday, and then with my teaching and learning team yesterday, we wanted to make sure that we've created a district steering committee for remote learning. And so that's kind of our overarching large committee at the district level, which will involve a variety of stakeholders, from Brooke and myself and people from, a variety of different departments. We talked about community members earlier. And so have that kind of major steering committee ready and at the helm and ready to go. And below that, and so this is kind of the flow chart that we created. And so below that at central office, we would have task forces that are really focused on those 4 areas you see at the bottom. So as we see it, we see moving into a remote learning model, or even just what this model looks like in the age of COVID come the fall. We certainly have one bucket that's related to safety, health, human resources, another bucket that is really related to childcare in our extended learning program, because we recognize that so many of our students come early oftentimes when parents need to work and they stay late. Certainly our work in the teaching and learning department, social emotional learning, we could certainly add our racial justice task force to that bucket as well. And then the 4th bucket being around operations and facilities in business and finance. So at the central office, we would then have task forces that tie into each one of those 4 buckets. And then at the building level, we'll be creating building level task forces at each one of our schools. So at the high school, Florence Sawyer, Mary Rowlandson, Luther Burbank Center, and Hale. And we would have certainly stakeholders from teachers and students and parents, administrators. Certainly yesterday in our meeting, we talked about the climate committee over at the high school and making sure that they're a major component of our high school task force. So we feel we've got a pretty good skeletal framework so that when we do get the specific guidance, we're able to really, kind of deploy everybody to where we need to go and really start building on that once we get it. So we felt really good about building that structure. And really, I would say kudos to our admin team, all hands on deck.
Yeah.
We certainly have so many people who don't work a lot in the summer and are willing to work in the summer. And like we talked about Dr. Angulo coming on and doing the social justice work, and Christy Nealon over at the center school joining forces with us. So we feel really good about everyone's willingness to participate, because it's certainly going to be an undertaking this summer. But I think that we obviously have learned from putting forward a remote learning model really quickly this spring. And so I think we all have a new bag of tools that we're going to be able to utilize pretty well. And also working with other school districts. There's been a lot of outreach to other school districts. I'm part of an assistant superintendent's roundtable group where we're just constantly bouncing ideas off of each other. So this is kind of our flow chart for that.
And I would just add too, like we have had discussion with our union leadership. And so for example, the steering committee, with whatever this learning looks like, we would want to see, for example, the president of the union sit on that committee. And then we talked about having a union lens at each of the building levels. So even though it's a teacher, we would need somebody to look through a union lens as well. So we talked about that. We talked about the role that we felt our school councils played, because I think that once we've had a lot of discussion about parent outreach and such, and who kind of helps to lead this charge, and we thought, and somebody I thought did a really nice job when they were talking about, we need to look to our elected officials, because they've already been chosen to play a role in our schools, and we see that role would now extend to this. With that also said, I would do a bit of outreach right now to our school committee and let you know that one of the things that has come up, and I'm not looking for a response tonight, but we would ask that you would consider taking part in the building task forces. So for example, we thought that Kathy, for example, might take part on the high school and as the chairman of our school committee, but then we would look to Joseph and Brett, for example, to help us out at Luther Burbank and Mary Rowlandson. Mike and Mary, we'd look to you to help us out with the Florence Sawyer campus and Emerson wing. And then, of course, Leah and Elaine and Steve, we would look to have you help us support us at Center and Hill on those task forces. So we put that forward just as a suggestion. We're not saying it's something we're not trying to mandate, but it is strictly voluntary. But please know that we've had that discussion, and we just think that there might be a nice role for you in there. So we've talked about the constitution of each of these committees. I think that we've just had a lot of discussion on it. I don't think we nailed it down, but we certainly had extensive discussion on who are the members of each of these and what expertise do we need on each of these. What does this look like? And as Todd said, the notion is like we'll be meeting again, and as we kind of streamline these now and say, we were talking about the charge of each of these groups and what does that look like, and how important that is first to make sure that we are clear on what the charge is and what the goal is for each of these different committees, and then how this all pulls together and ties together. And we see some of our own staff, for example, on multiple committees, because there would be a nice conjoining of some of these. So I think that we've had lots of discussion around that. Todd, let's go to our other slide as well, please, if you could. And maybe you can just quickly talk us through it as well.
Okay, so similarly in this diagram, you can see the 4 areas that we've identified as really important, at the district level, from busing, facilities, operations, our extended learning and childcare, safety, health, human resources, and then our teaching and learning component, social emotional learning, social justice, racial justice. In that middle circle would be that district steering committee that's kind of working in all of those areas. And then on the outside, so you have our task forces at each one of our school districts. So instead of a flow chart, this kind of speaks to how it will stem out from that district steering committee, which would be in that center circle there, to those 4 areas. And then all of our task forces on the outside working with their task forces and their groups at their individual schools. And also the recognition, we talked about that we want to also make sure that buildings continue to have their autonomy and their identity. We recognize that each one of our schools, and we're really good at doing this, I think, in this district, each one of our schools has, its own identity and some of its own autonomy, and we're certainly a lot of talk around the high school, with a lot of opportunities there with the Culture and Climate Committee, new leadership that's coming in there, the work Kim Early's been doing in the humanities lead position, and her ability to be over there and help lead that task force. So that gives some flexibility within in a lot of our buildings moving forward as well, still with a focus on these 4 main buckets.
So I hope that you can see that, we're basically, we've created a structure now. We feel comfortable. We've had a lot of thoughtful, rich discussion on all of this with every member of our admin group having a voice. And that's always important to us. If you were to ever take into our meetings, you would see that everybody around that table has a voice, and we want to hear from them. And so I feel good about where we landed. I think that what you're seeing tonight is us kind of succinctly putting together in a snapshot really rich discussions into something that's kind of simple to understand, and how we see the flow chart moving the information out. I think as we were talking about how each school would get glean information from its own parent community as an example. We see them all doing something just a little bit different. We want them to have the autonomy to do that. We know again what the end goal would be, but how they do it would be up to them as per their own individual community. So we just to wrap up, we've tried to create the consistency across the district, particularly with the steering committee going out, and then leave the autonomy available for each school to do its own unique approach.
Thank you. Questions? I know it's a work in progress. As you said, you have the skeleton of it and identified the different constituencies, if you will, that would be part of it. And even within whatever guidelines come out, the real philosophy of the whole thing is that individual schools will be able to tailor what they can for the needs of their school, their population. Questions? Oh, Todd, hi. Go ahead.
Just an add-on, you know, I want to make it clear too that the Teaching and Learning Department also created a survey that we were able to send out. You know, we created surveys that we were able to get out to families and community members and even our students at the high school level about halfway or, you know, 2/3 of the way through the remote learning.
Yeah.
We've also created and sent out a survey to all of our faculty and staff in terms of, you know, what are their needs moving forward to make sure that they're successful. You know, I know that, you know, Leah brought up some things around technology and technology, you know, prowess at the high school for our high school teachers, et cetera. And so we want to make sure that we identify their needs as we move forward once we get the specific guidance and identify what it will be. We want to make sure that we're giving our teachers everything that they need moving forward. And, you know, we're going to jump into Summer Academy in a couple of weeks as well. And the Teaching and Learning Department has developed, you know, Summer Academy. It's going to provide professional development that's really focused around, you know, this kind of model too. So, and we'll continue to do that kind of outreach to get feedback on how we move forward with these task forces.
Thank you. No, I'm glad
Yep.
to hear about the surveys. Mike, unmute.
All right, I get this thing on my screen that says idiot unmute. So thank you. I realize that this process is very nebulous and murky at this point. But it does seem through my own district and this district that the state is beginning to triangulate around primarily two options. And I'm wondering, understanding that we don't want to invest time and energy and money into something that might not happen, are we planning to some extent for different possibilities so that when this decision comes, we aren't starting from scratch? I mean, I know that that's sort of the foundation of what you offered, Todd, but are we sort of saying, if this is what's going to happen, we're going to start working from here, and then if this happens, we're gonna run with this?
Yeah, Mike. It's a great question. Thank you. And you were someone who emailed me and said, you know, are you know, making sure that we're aware of the CARES Act and the CARES Act money that's tied to a lot of this work. So I'm happy to report that we worked on that all last week and over the weekend. We did submit that because Neshoba is eligible for a pretty significant amount of money. We did submit that on Monday, and by Monday night we were approved for those monies. So what our teams have been doing over the past several weeks is articulating, based on what we think we will need, where we will need that money to articulate specific programming as it relates to special education, as it relates to technology and making sure kids have Chromebooks and the technology that they need, making sure that they've got the technological applications online that are, you know, fully usable and their highest extent for families, students, etc. So as well as making sure that we can create a task force that can do this kind of work, you know, in the summertime. So it's a great question, and we've really put a focus on where that should be targeted and made sure that we included people like Joan DeAngelis in there, you know, Pat Marone was in there, our teaching and learning teams, our principals, to really our technology department to really highlight what those needs are and what we can use that money for, similar PPE, et cetera. So I think we will, now that that's been approved and so quickly, we're going to be able to have those resources to put them in places that we need.
Great. Other questions for Todd or Brooke? Leah, and then Elaine. Go ahead.
So I'm sure that you guys have already thought about this, but I just wanted to kind of go on the record as saying, I think that it's important to survey everybody again. I know that I said this last time. I think an end of year survey is important, especially of the high school students. I don't know if teachers are doing that in any systematic or in any systematic way, but the feedback that I've been getting through my surveys in my town is students, if we were to go back into a remote learning model, students are wanting more live time with their teachers. So I think that you'll see some common threads of that sort that might not be the mode that we're most comfortable with, but that we need to kind of move in that direction.
Thank you.
So we had really rich discussion on, ways to connect with our parents and our students on this. That was part of our discussion on Friday as well. So yeah, we have a plan that's coming together on that.
Elaine?
Yeah, you may not have answers. In fact, I know you're not going to have answers to this, but it's something that I want you to keep in mind. When you said, we may not hear from the state until right before school starts. We may not have this plan solidified until right before school starts. That makes total sense operationally, but what I'm already starting to hear from people is, well, depending on what the plan is, as a parent, I'll make the decision for my kid once I know. And I would hate to see a scenario where the first couple of days of school are absolute chaos because parents are saying, well, I'm going to homeschool now. And, I'm going to send my kid in, and numbers in the classes are flying all over the place. So as much as we possibly can put out in advance, I think we'll give people time to either adjust to it and accept and process it, or make those decisions that I'm starting to hear people are ready to make.
So we're well aware of that, and the state is well aware of that, and we've had that discussion through the commissioner. Well, we don't really have a lot of discussion with the commissioner, but the questions are asked of the commissioner, and we're listening to the responses. So that certainly has come up time and again, and the commissioner has certainly stressed to us the notion of making sure that we are surveying our parents to see who's coming back, who's not, and things like these are just, this is just so multi-layered. Like when you get down to it, the layers on this it's just incredible. So for example, we also need to know who's going to be taking the bus and who isn't going to be riding the bus, because I can also see some parents saying, I don't want my child to ride the bus. And that's absolutely, we respect that decision. On our end, we need to start to think about, what does that traffic flow look like now? I worry about Bolton, and one getting out. All of us have to get out on 117, but Bolton, that just those tiny circles, and how many cars. If we have let's just say if we have another 100 parents that say, no, we're going to be driving our kids, that's a lot more cars to put on the road, in that small area. So, these are things that we are thinking a lot. I think Leah had alluded earlier the notion of how much work is done behind the scenes, and that's one of those examples where we're thinking, do we need to get more police detail? Do we need to think about, are there things, and exactly as you said tonight with Dr. Coleman, will we end up having to utilize him more? We're not sure right now. There's, again, the whole notion of living with that ambiguity it's tough to do when you thrive on structure. Well, for me, I'd speak for myself, but.
Yeah, it is. And school districts with 3,000 kids and hundreds of staff aren't really designed to turn on a dime the way that they've been forced to do this spring, and probably may have to do again in the fall. So just hate to see all this planning and I totally appreciate how complicated it is. Believe me, I do. Every time I even start to think about one of these aspects, I get overwhelmed and give up. So I can't imagine actually working through it all. But to make that announcement and then have everyone change their plans and then have to redo it anyway.
Yeah. I do have a question of Mike, because I want to go back to the question or comment that you had made. You talked about two models. Can you define what those two models may or may not look like from your lens?
Sure. The information that we're getting is that there are primarily two models. The first is a hybrid model that I think most people are aware of, and the other that I'm getting is a potential full return, and it's weighing those two. Those two options have very, very different consequences in terms of how we plan. So, if we were to plan for a hybrid model, and then we went for a full return, certainly that would be a drain in all kinds of resources. And vice versa. So I guess my question is, or was, to what extent can we plan for both so that we're sort of balancing the amount of resources that go into each planning operation, but not fully committing because we really can't have both, right? I mean,
Right.
have both.
So to like just and not to throw complications into this, but so your thinking is spot on, which is why again I said right at the beginning, I do wonder if the commissioner isn't being deliberate and strategic and not coming out because we're waiting to see what happens with these numbers, if these numbers continue to get better. And that's what we all want anyway. And all of us really want a return to normal. I mean, that's really the ultimate goal of all of this. But I think, we also want to do that in a safe way so that we don't find ourselves right back here again in the exact spot that we're in right now. So one of the key things for us right now is just, and I'm sure it is for, in fact, I had a long conversation the other day with Dr. Rodriguez. And as we were comparing notes with each other of where we're at with our district and such, and I'm so grateful for relationships I have with other superintendents like him, where you can sit down and have that frank discussion. Okay, and of course, one of the things we're talking about is schedules, right? How do we plan our schedules right now? And if we end up doing the hybrid model, that really is likely a 5-day cycle. And none of our schools run on a 5-day cycle. We all run on a 6-day cycle. In our district, we all run on a 6-day, and the high school runs on an 8-day. So then we looked and said, okay, do we just all go to a 6-day? Because the high school, we could probably put the high school onto a 6-day, and it probably would be doable without being like imploding something else. But the 6-day isn't the 5-day, right? And so, then you look and say, well, do we want to put the amount of work and effort into a 5-day? And then in 3 weeks, he says, no, we can just go do our regular schedules. Well, then, so it's hard, Mike. You're absolutely right. It's so hard to know where to put those energies without it, being a huge amount of effort, and then have to pivot again and do something completely different. So I know how frustrating this is. Just as the CFO, DESE CFO said to us, I know how frustrating this is. I would say even to our parents and to our staff, I know how frustrating this is for all of us right now, because this is not how we run things, and it's not a good feeling to say, well, we're going to have to wait just a little bit longer. I hate every time I have to go to the administrative team and say, we just need another week, but apparently we're going to know another week. It's not a good feeling for us either, so we don't like living in this space either right now for sure. But we're not hearing a lot on the full return model. So if you're hearing a lot on that, then that would be news to us. Is it something that's out there that people would like? I would say absolutely. And we would be the first in line to say, please put us to something, akin to normal. But we're not hearing a push on that. And what we're hearing is the push on the hybrid. And in fact, even at the last meeting we had, we were told again that if we do go down to this hybrid model, if we want to either move more towards what we would call normal or more towards remote, we are going to have to explain that to the state and receive special waivers.
Yeah.
So that's the last that we heard. So even the notion of if we ultimately want to move more towards a normal, we will have to justify that and explain that to the state and have their blessing. In fact, that's where we land.
Okay. Okay. Are we ready to move on? Any other questions? Right. Thank you. And I know comfort with ambiguity. It's probably a virtue, not necessarily a strength, but the plan, the tentative plan, as specified as it is, the bones are there, and we can be nimble. We've proved that in the past.
Yes, and we can pivot. Yeah.
So yes, that too. So nothing really to update. I know that Brooke and I think Todd are going to the Lancaster town meeting on Monday, which it will be a drive-in affair. We're not sure how it's going to work. So I'll just leave it at that. But cars will be involved in the Bolton Fairground in terms of how we get to advocate or ask questions about our warrant article. Brooke and I are working on finding that out. Bolton, Mike and Mary, I know that you're not going to, Mike, you're going to go, and Pat and Anne Marie, is that the plan? Okay. All right. And where are they having the Bolton one?
At the high school, and they're having it in the auditorium, and they were going to have, initially they were going to have spillover or additional placements in the upper gym, and my understanding now is that they're going to cordon off the parking lot right outside of the auditorium so that people can have some outside space if they want to. But we want to be clear, they have to bring their own chair, so I'm just putting that out there as a little extra. If you're going to want to be outside, please make sure that you take your own chair.
Very good. Thank you. Superintendent's update.
We're not going to have a regular update like we normally would. We really just wanted to, I know that Todd's got a little bit of an announcement that he just wants to make, kind of to tag along to what he was talking about earlier with the grant monies that he was talking about. And all kudos to everyone who pulled together that grant to get it, because it was such a quick turnaround time frame that by the time we learned about it, got the information about it, and then turned it around. All credit to Todd and Pat and the teaching and learning team, everybody, Joan, everybody that was involved in that, everybody, it was really a team effort. And so and Todd, I'll give you a minute here to mention that again. But the only other thing I would say is we did send an end of year note around to our families today. And, when we were talking about preparing the video that we included, and Anne Marie said to me today, she said, and I apologize for saying what you said to me earlier. She said, I just wanted to cry because it was like, yes, that's what normal looks like. When you saw all the pictures of all the students. And Todd and I were talking about the songs, and we both said right away, we got to have We Are the Champions in there. Because you know what? We finished strong. And oh my gosh, I just could not be prouder of this district. I mean, our students, they were working right to the end. I did send around to the school committee too the video that the parents prepared for MRE for the grade 2s. Oh my gosh, I mean, how precious was that? That was just such a precious video to watch too. But I am so proud of our staff, of our administrator, of our parents, who by default suddenly became teachers. It's just amazing. And something that was so dark and difficult to navigate, I just think that our school district, like always, just shone so brightly as a result of everybody who is part of Neshoba Regional School District. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to our school committee, to our admin, our parents, our staff, our students. Thank you.
Todd? Did you have something?
Yeah, so I had mentioned that through the CARES Act, Neshoba was eligible for monies. And so like we are eligible through Title I and Title II, 3, and 4 every year, we go through a process where we identify our needs because we qualify for federal monies to the district based on the needs in different areas through special education, our ELL learners, technology, curriculum instruction, et cetera. So through the CARES Act that was enacted through the federal government through the COVID crisis, Neshoba was eligible for just over $214,000. And so with that, similarly to what we do every year with Titles 1 through 4 money, we've got to identify the needs. So what we did as a team is we began creating a possible expenditures list. And we did that in identifying the items, identifying the cost of that to begin with this fiscal year, what category that particular item would belong in, and how it connected to the grant in and of itself and its benefits to students. Once we did that, we met as a group to identify and prioritize. Prioritizing with a level 1 meant it was absolutely essential that we get this kind of funding for this particular item. A 2 was, yes, it's pretty necessary. And a 3 was, we'd like to have it. And then through that process, we were able to prioritize. So we did fill that out. We did complete that grant last week and over the weekend. And we turned that in earlier this week. And like I mentioned earlier, we were approved for the full monies. And so just to give you a sense of what that money is going to be used for, it's going to be used for professional development for administrators on social emotional learning needs, on a re-entry to school after having been out of school. since March. Trauma-informed support for staff and students. We certainly are looking for summer professional development for online learning, and that was some feedback that we certainly got from communities, parents, and you folks in our surveys. We're looking at a major Chromebook purchase for grades 3 to 5, and with that purchase, we'll be looking to be going 1-to-1 in the entire district from grades 3 through 12. It's an absolute fantastic opportunity to be looking at that for our younger grades. So we were approved for those monies. Approval for a task force for our fall reentry planning, as we talked a lot about earlier. We're looking at getting Lexia and Power Up reading technologies for our special education students and our general education students. Some technological applications through Screencastify and Edpuzzle, which allow teachers in a remote sense to be casting what they're putting on their screens to their students. Summer curriculum development to map our essential prerequisite skills in math and ELA as it relates to the district improvement plan. Critical skill mapping and micro-progression development for our K-5 literacy program. We're approved for social emotional tools to support our opening of our school year in the fall, as well as reading and math tutorials for students, and to also complete our special education evaluations through the summer of 2020, as well as money for essential PPE as we enter the fall and needing those elements for our students and staff. So we're really excited about the grant, and we were told pretty immediately that we were approved for those monies. So
Very good. Thank you. Oh, everybody good? Okay. So I'm going to ask Elaine to read the motion for the consent agenda, please.
Yes, I move to approve the consent agenda of June 17th, 2020, containing the warrants of June 19th, 2020, and the meeting minutes of June 3rd, 2020, and the workshop minutes of June 3rd, 2020.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Leah.
Somebody.
Elaine?
Yes.
Kathy, yes. Brett?
Yes.
Oh, I heard him. Leah?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Okay, let's see, where we at? Items for next agenda, July 1st, we will be doing our organizational meeting, and we're going to see about getting a report on the audit. Was there anything else for that meeting?
Oh, it'll come up.
All right.
You may have to do you may have to take the union negotiations.
Yes.
You may have to take a vote on that.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So we will have the executive session, and I will let Elaine read the motion for that.
Okay. I read both of these at the same time, right?
Do you have a glass of water to help you out get through this one?
Go ahead. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Just go right ahead.
Elite.
Yes, Alita?
Oh, yes, Alita.
Chair, can I go into the executive session just for the minutes? I can take the corrections, and I think I have an answer to Mary's question.
Yes, thank you. So
Okay.
to include Alita.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Elaine gave me the answer. And so the reason I abstained was that I was not on the committee, and Joe, we weren't on the committee. It was 2019. Thank you, Alita.
Okay, then I don't need to go in.
No,
I'm all set.
Okay,
thank you, Elaine.
thank you. Go ahead, Elaine.
All right. I move to go into executive session at 8:22 p.m. pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements. Review of executive session minutes of June 5th, 2019, September 11th, 2019, October 23rd, 2019, March 11th, 2020, April 27th, 2020, May 6th, 2020, and May 20th, 2020, in accordance with Open Meeting Law MGL Chapter 30A, and pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the public body, and the chair so declares. George King v. Neshoba Regional School District and Patricia Marone, civil docket number 18CV643A, executive session to include Superintendent Klenji, Assistant Superintendent Dr. McGuire, Business Manager Pat Marone, Human Resources Manager Anne Marie Stoika, and District Legal Counsel Kevin Freytag. Committee will adjourn in executive session.
And I think Dr. McGuire is going to be excused